Welcome to Momentum Mode. My name is Kelsey Behringer. You'll hear me alongside my co-host Mike Shannon shortly. This episode will feature an interview with Kelsey Behringer, the CEO of Packback. Kelsey recently led the company through a successful exit from an early-stage venture capital firm to a growth capital firm and is working through all the changes that kind of an ownership change brings to a company. We're going to cover a wide range of topics from teams, managing through change, company culture, managing boards of directors, and also helping your team grow as company goes through those shifts. But before we jump in, I want to thank our sponsor, Kilpatrick, Townsend & Stockton, innovation-focused law firm with 22 offices around the world, including our hometown of Chicago. Also thank to Mike's company Improve, Corey's company Aperion Ventures for their support of the pod. On with the episode.
Thank you for having me.
Well,
Familiar faces.
Yeah, right.
Very familiar. A fun episode for us today. For those who don't know the context, Kelsey and I shared a board member, which was this guy, Kelsey Behringer. Kelsey is the CEO of Packback. I'm the former CEO of Packback. Corey was both of our board members for overlapping periods of time. So this is going to be fun. We've got a lot of shared
and you're leaving out another one where you transitioned to Kelsey and I was involved in the transition, so it makes it even crazier.
Which is a topic we've covered, and I'm sure we'll get into all of it today. But in our CEO perspective, Kelsey, we're going to cover kind of the broad snapshot of your view and perspective today as a leader. So let's start just opening the bag with, as you became CEO, and you have a deep background in teaching, which makes sense. Now you're leading a pedagogy tech company. What was most surprising or unexpected?
Yeah, I think, I'm truly not trying to brown nose here. You did a great job of preparing me.
You have no reason to kiss up anymore. It's your job. Right? It's good.
The $20 bills in the backpack.
Of preparing me for what was going to happen. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of the job was not a surprise was because you set me up for success. Even when you came to me, Mike put a calendar invite on my calendar and asked if we could grab coffee. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting fired, right? That's what's going to happen right now. And then we got,
there's no way.
When you get the CEO invite and you're like a director of customer success, you're like, what's happening, right? But the coffee chat was, hey, I think you might be the next CEO. Let's talk about it. And even then you told me, this is everything that could go right in this process. This is everything that could go wrong. So a lot of the things that I think sometimes can be surprising about the CEO role, whether it's the amount of time and energy you spend on board management, or you told me this, the amount of time you spend on HR fires, truly, it becomes part of the job almost all of the time. The one thing I was not expecting that is very real, and I felt this at many portions in my journey, but most, I think, severely as CEO, is how lonely you get. And Drake says, trust me, at the top, it isn't lonely, but Drake is not a CEO because it is.
He pays his friends too.
And so I think there are ways to supplement it, but at the end of the day, you have to present yourself to the board in such a way that's like quite measured. You can't go to them frustrated with an employee unless you have a really good reason to communicate your frustration. And you can't communicate that you're really struggling with something unless you've really thought through how you're going to communicate that with a true purpose. And your executive team, they're not your peers, they're your employees. So you have to find ways to supplement, I think, that loneliness. You have great folks who you used to work with who you can call. Mike, you've gotten a text from me like, hey, can you talk? And you know what's coming. So you have to supplement, your people and your relationships. But at the end of the day, the only person who really knows what it's like to be the CEO of your company is you. And I think that was really surprising.
We had a previous
guest. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Dan Dale Deegan, shout out. Unscripted. Two of you didn't interact. Same exact answer.
First thing he said.
What nobody prepares you for is the loneliness of the CEO role. So let's unpack that a little bit more. And I think for both you and I, part of combating that was this guy, Corey Cullen. But as you've built your structure around you in this new age of Packback, where Corey and I are out, how have you sort of structured that surrounding supporting cast for you on that point of the natural loneliness?
I think first and foremost, part of it, and what I found really valuable, is having really strong non-work, non-professional relationships. Because I always felt that way as a Packback employee, as a teacher, is like my life and my relationships can't majority be
only
about
be the
work.
company. Yeah.
Because oftentimes the answer to that loneliness is just to be able to like compartmentalize, say goodbye, turn it off, and then go do something. I have an amazing group of friends, and amazing family members who help, I think, really supplement a lot of that, like that emotional person that I need to be taking care of on the inside. That is a person that's also happens to be running the company.
Yep.
I also have I'm a part of a women's forum that I really love. And it borders this line between feeding the professional woman and also feeding the person.
Yeah.
And the forum is a collection of individuals. We all are in different, careers. We're all in different industries, but we all have kind of this desire and this thirst for something that sits between the professional and personal. And going to them for support has been tremendously helpful. So that's another avenue I've taken. And then I always just jump at an opportunity of like when I'm in a really tough situation of Mike and Corey, help.
Or somebody, right? You got to have those outlets, right?
Let me ask, because we always try to unpack everything that we get thrown at us here. So on the point of the forum, I think a lot of folks, especially rising executives, are curious about that. So open the door for us. Like, what's actually happening in that forum? Are you meeting every quarter? Is it weekly? Is it just a Slack once in a while? Like, what happens in this forum that is of value?
Yes. So I must say how I found this forum. One of my friends who actually is a band member with Packback's former CSO, Casey, Selena.
Okay.
Her and I were chatting, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to be entering this forum. You should really look at it." And the forum is run by somebody who was formerly with the Junto Institute. So kind of cool. The Chicago community really.
So Junto Institute was a mentoring startup incubator in Chicago area.
Yep. So the forum is called Evolve, and so it's a total of, I think, 8 of us. I'm going to get that right. Total of 8 of us. So we meet on is it monthly or quarterly? I'm losing my mind. It might be monthly or every other month. But I talk to them constantly, so that's why I can't remember. Right. It's either monthly or every other month. So we meet, and I don't want to give too much away in the forum and the secret sauce. No. But basically, that's an opportunity for all of us to unpack. And the other thing that I love about this forum I'm in is that it forces everybody to share gratitude for one another. And think about when you were CEO, COO, whatever these jobs, how often were you just getting people like seeing you and giving you gratitude on a regular basis? Yeah. And for things that you might not even see in yourself. Right. So it's been so nourishing to the soul. But then we also have a group meme, and once a week, somebody answers a guided prompt, and then we just kind of help each other, support each other. We have a rule where you have to ask for advice if you want advice. Otherwise, you can't give advice. But yeah, it's tremendous. And I don't think I ever would have found that group if it wasn't just for the activity of networking, period, right? Yep. I think that's when you find these sorts of things and they kind of present themselves to you when you take action on building that network.
But you're nailing a theme we have continually we've talked about and we've heard is as a CEO, you've got to have those other sources. And, sometimes it can be your board. It isn't always. And if it is a board member, it's going to be independent, not probably your investor board members, right? And, how do you get that advice? Because you're confronted with things on a near daily basis that you're like, what the heck was that? And one you mentioned was the HR side. So you said, have you found yourself having to deal with a lot of those where you're like, oh, I guess this is my job now?
Yeah. It's when I first started. Yes, it was surprising. I didn't realize how much of the job it really truly happens in the background and people don't see, right?
Yep.
Iceberg analogy all the way through. But I fortunately was able to hire a wonderful VP of people.
Where'd you meet them?
No idea.
Happened to work for Corey before joining Packback. And wow, has Jen changed my life.
Changes having a good person, right?
Having first and foremost, she's so optimistic. She's so open. It's almost like she knows exactly what to do, when to do it. It's invaluable to have a person of that like caliber and excellence in that seat, because what you don't need is to make mistakes when you have personnel issues.
Should actually have her on a future episode.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's very interesting to people think about the CEO and they think about the board of directors and they think about the numbers and forget about the people side. Yeah. So now you're in a spot where you've gone through a transaction recently where you were acquired by a private equity firm. You've begun to make some changes to the management team. Yeah. And we're still in this kind of somewhat remote world. So how are you attacking culture in the organization?
Yeah. I felt like before hiring Jen, so I hired Jen when that would have been back in June. So now it's been 4 months. Wow. Okay. I felt like it was very much on me to figure this out. And rightfully so. I do feel like it is my job to set the tone, set the pace, set the ethos. And I'm definitely, I have big teacher energy. So culture is important to me. Yeah. And so one thing that I always felt was really important whenever addressing culture and trying to figure out how do we just create this culture is really understanding and getting a pulse check. Yep. So one thing that I had my wonderful chief of staff doing, Michaela, who Mike brought on, was doing what I didn't realize were actually stay interviews, but we called them Know and Grows. So every single employee twice a year gets a one-on-one with Michaela, and she just says, what do you love about Packback? Yeah. And it helps inform what you should do more of. Yeah. What do you wish was different about Packback? Yeah. What do you want to change? And it's all qualitative, right? Yeah, and you kind of have to she would do, I think 10 at a time and then distill down themes. And it's all anonymized, which I really hope everyone at my company knows that they're truly anonymized. But I would get themes. And one theme I got was like, hey, a 1 hour weekly all hands is not really great for us. We feel like it's a little bit perfunctory at this point in time. So we flipped to something meeting. I stole from Jen, a 10X, right? Yeah. So a 10-minute all hands every single week, and then a longer form all hands every other month that is really, really, really intentional. Yeah. Where we're, focusing on big change or big stories or big celebrations. Yeah. But I think it all goes back to really making sure you have a handle and an understanding of what your employees actually want, what they want you to start doing, and what they want you to stop doing.
So I love this concept of the learning with the individual employees and not being you, so they could be a little more open. Oh yeah. What is it about Michaela's personality that makes that work? Because I could see somebody, and I'm thinking through my head of other boards I'm on as like, oh, that person couldn't do that. Kind of like, what's about her that makes so people open up to her and tell her what they really think?
That's a good question. Michaela is wonderful EQ. She also can really read a room. So she goes in and she's really forward about intentionality, right? This is the purpose. I'm going to reaffirm to you that this is anonymous, and just kind of really, really, really forward with intentionality. And then if she notices a conversation is going in a direction, she'll keep pulling on that thread. Okay. But the other thing about Michaela is that she's my right hand, but she's always working on special projects. She's working on company communications. So I think that the way that Michaela is perceived in the organization period is just like a safe friend who's always kind of helping move the company forward. She's always trying to find stories to shout out employees. The nature of the work she does is incredibly positive. Yep. And her nature is incredibly helpful. But I think one thing that's been really helpful is that she doesn't necessarily have a huge team underneath her. Yeah. Which is good. Yeah, that's it, right? If I was going into those interviews, people are gonna be, I'm not gonna be honest with the CEO. Right. Yeah. Even if, no way. I'm gonna say this now. I think everyone in my company trusts Jen wholeheartedly, but there is something about as an executive, a C title, a VP title, puts a meeting on your calendar and says, don't worry, it's all anonymous. Tell me all of your things you wish you could change. Yeah. Everyone's gonna be a little bit guarded. So I think there's a lot of value in somebody who really feels like a peer and ingrained in the culture, taking on that task.
Well, you're bringing up something that I had a mentor of mine over time tell me that it's not about direct authority, it's about referential authority, right? What do people, forget what the org chart says. What do people know? They know she has your ear. Right. They know systematically this is part of the organization, and this is, other people will say, oh no, I've said stuff, it never got back, right? So that kind of referential authority she has, that she's going to do this and everybody knows, it's a great tool. It's I can see where you just learn a ton.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's amazing. And I think another thing for culture that I've tried to do is just really over the top communication. Yeah. We have a 10-minute meeting every single Monday. Yep. 10X Packback. We have all
11 a.m. maybe.
Ours is at 12:50.
Oh,
I know,
okay.
because I got this from Jen. This is an idea from Jen.
Got it. Yeah.
Which from
Yeah,
Noah.
familiar.
And I write a memo every single Friday. And portions of that memo, I know.
Oh, I never did that.
Corey's Corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard about that one. But actually, Mike got me in the memo writing a
Take
game.
that, Corey.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep,
there
yep.
we go.
You got it from Corey? It's
No,
all.
I said take that.
Yeah,
Okay. And then, of course, we have the town halls and then everything in the middle. But I think so much of culture is just, do people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it?
Yeah.
And reinforcing it to the point of insanity
Yeah.
is good.
Yes.
I always
Anything less
felt
than
that
insanity.
your ability to communicate with the group at large and down to the individuals, but really bring the group along with your vision, whether you were CEO or not, was always a defining thing of your leadership. And part of your unique background is in classroom teaching, which how fitting for an education tech company.
Yep.
But for folks that are, the rising executives in the audience coming from different backgrounds, how has your teaching background contributed to your toolbox or your style now as a CEO?
Yeah, many things. I think the amount of education that goes into change management and talk about the amount of change that's happened in the Packback organization just in the last 2 years. We've had a new CEO, new owners. We've launched a new product pretty much almost every year for the past 3 years.
Right.
So having this really heavy L&D focus on the way that I communicate, and I think the values of the organization,
learning and development.
Yeah, thank you. Is definitely something I've taken with me, and I think it could be seen as I need to make sure I do that, versus core to the way that we communicate is, do my employees understand what's happening, why it's happening, and do they understand all of the change down to the fabric. So definitely focus on learning and development. I think also too, as an educator, I taught chemistry and physics. I taught 180 students a year. Guess how many students actually wanted to be in that classroom?
Right. Not this one.
Yeah. I mean, less than 20%, really, if we're being honest. So day one is, how can I convince these teenagers?
I got to win you over.
Yeah, with an undeveloped frontal cortexes
tough
to
audience.
want to learn chemistry and physics. And then it's every single day I have to inspire them to be motivated to want to learn in my class. And I think when you're in an organization, that's everything. How are you building the culture that is motivating for your employees to want to be there and want to show up and want to learn and feel satisfied with their work? Because of course I'm worried about the performance of the organization, but I'm also very much invested in making sure every single employee wants to be there, is happy, is satisfied, and is growing. And that lens, I think, has been really helpful for me in bringing some of that to fruition.
All right. So just to take inventory of what's in your kind of toolbox in doing that, we've heard you do a 10-minute weekly meeting. You do a longer all hands that's every other month. You have a chief of staff that does Know and Grows, or effectively a stay interview. You write a memo every Friday. There's a lot of pieces that are bringing this communication all together. Anything else in that communication system?
Oh, there's so much. And part of what Michaela does is she helps me put together the town halls, the memos, the 10Xs. Well, part of that is I need to every single week touch base with the senior management team.
What needs to go in here?
Because we need to know what to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most common pains you'll hear from an employee is, I feel like the company never recognizes my work, or I feel like our team is never spotlighted. So it's so important. Like, hey, senior leader, department head, I'm hearing this feedback. Give me more. I need you to give me more so that I could do more, because I can't do that alone. I really need their input.
So we hit a bunch on culture and such. Since you've had a new owner come in, how much has financial management driven your decision making? A lot. Well, then that's right. I mean, we could all care about the people and the culture, but the results is what you're trying to get. How does that affect your decision making? How does it drive the choices you make? Yeah.
So I think one thing that has been, I mean, it was always present in the prior ownership, and it was always present in the prior board, but has been really enhanced almost under a microscope, is just every decision you have to have outcome orientation. And I've noticed my brain change to the point where when, the marketing team is asking me to write a piece of content, I'm thinking, well, who's the audience and how are we going to track the performance of this piece? And how is it going to relate to pipeline? it's like KPI, ROI, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more, I would say, rigorous in outcome orientation. So as you think about financial management, and I'm really thinking of just cost and spend of what we spend on,
Sure.
I need proof that every dollar we're spending is at least making another dollar.
It's driving it back to the top line.
Right?
Yep.
Well, and I'll point out, you straddle a difficult line in doing that. Every business leader does, but you primarily serve educators. This isn't B2B SaaS.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
You primarily lead. Well, maybe at least a large portion of your team are educators and former educators.
Yep.
So that's not to say that educators don't have a business mindset, but it is a different domain.
Yes.
And so here you are, teacher at one point, CEO, you're straddling that line. How do you go about that?
Teachers
part?
don't go into the everyday talk about profits,
Right,
it's
just
not
as
a
natural.
thing.
So at sometimes that business mentality, or at least talking about the bottom line, can be viewed sort of icky or so, right? So how are you straddling that line?
That's a good question. Well, I think that what you had built at Packback, what you have built at Packback, is a company that is very transparent about the financial health of the organization on a consistent basis. So one thing that you had built that I kept is financial town halls, or at least a financial portion of town halls. So, taking a look at, what did we set out to do this year? How are we pacing towards it? Specifically, why are we maybe underperforming? Why are we overperforming? What's the plan to bridge that gap? But then you also just break it down. You make sure that people understand, what do we mean by EBITDA? What do we mean by cost of sales? And make sure that any individual can truly understand and have financial literacy. And
but without talking down to them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's true for really any employee, regardless of background, right? My former teachers, but also my individuals who are coming from a different space, right? A copywriting space, or maybe they just graduated college. So it's, I think, financial transparency to a point, right?
Yep.
We don't we don't want to be too, and you also have to balance, if you are underperforming, not scaring the crap out of everyone.
Always a challenge.
Right. Yeah. But I think that transparency is really helpful, and that's something I've taken from you. And then we have this campaign analysis every single week. It's a how many slide deck.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, their sales process runs a campaign, and the campaign is incredibly in depth with metrics to tell you how it's tracking and how these interactions are going to lead to revenue and where they are in that funnel. And it is one of the most detailed analysis I've ever seen at a company, and is a great tool. But my Lord, it's a bear.
Yes. It does require a PhD to read it, top to bottom, but we do train on said PhD at Packback upon onboarding. But part of the reason why I like that is the very first slide is just financial performance. And then this is sent out to the entire company every single week. So oftentimes I just redirect them to that. I say, you can always see how we're performing against our goals right there.
So we're at time on the perspective piece. So interesting. We start with strategy. We almost inevitably end up with trust and values and culture. And on tactically achieving the culture that Kelsey Behringer leads, you talked about a system of communication that was multi-pronged and had multi-stakeholders. And so, fascinating episode. Thank you, Kelsey, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.